Let's do a shot every time someone runs Josie and the Pussycats.
That could get out of hand pretty quick.
Okay. How about a shot every time someone asks us a question about Patrick Swayze?
I personally think it's a good idea if we don't drink at work.
Okay, geez, fine. I'll play without you.
Welcome to Rewind Video. I'm Bob.
I'm Rob.
And we love movies. Good ones, bad ones, old ones, new ones, big movies, small movies. Rob, some people like popcorn.
Fuck yeah.
Some people like Junior Mints. The movie theater is convinced that all that I want is a Coke while I'm watching a movie.
Wrong.
That is wrong. When I sit down in front of the television and I hit play on a film, I want a beer.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? It's the right way to go.
It's a good way to go. It's not the only way to go, but it's a good thing to have.
I'm going to share a quick story with you to illustrate this point.
Yes.
So when I was in college, I enjoyed bringing beer into the movie theater. It was against the rules. They didn't sell it. As I mentioned, it's better than the concessions that were on sale. So I would often, buy like a big pounder of of light beer.
Yes.
And
1 pound beer.
Right. Put it in the waistline of my pants.
Yes.
And hope that I wasn't caught. And there was one time where I did this. I had 2 of them in the waistline of my pants, and I was walking toward the guy who would take the tickets, and one of them fell down my pant leg, which caused a lot of panic.
Embarrassing.
Yeah, very embarrassing. And I was worried that he had caught me in my attempt to sneak in beer, but based on the look on his face and in my scrambling attempt to pull it back up, I was certain that he thought, this man's penis just fell off. He's trying to reattach it.
That's a hell of a penis.
Yeah. But, since then and to this day, having a drink while watching a movie, it's hard to beat.
Alcohol and movies go together real well.
Right. And so, because you and I have the honor of keeping the staff recommendation shelf stocked with movies that deserve our customers' attention, we're going to talk tonight about booze. Every time we add new movies to the shelf, we adhere to a theme, and this week's theme is Boozed Up.
Cheers to that, sir.
Cheers to that. I personally hate it. This is something I've been thinking about as I've seen this category, this theme approaching on our list. I personally hate it when characters are supposed to act drunk in a movie and can't pull it off.
It's a hard thing to pull off.
It seems so fake to me so often. So that was on my radar when I was thinking about this.
It's bad. When it's bad, it's bad.
Yeah. It's and these are actors. They're acting should be what they do well, but somehow acting drunk is not a skill that a lot of Hollywood stars have.
Well, they say acting like yourself is one of the hardest things for an actor to do, and acting drunk is I don't know, maybe something closer to that.
Right. So yeah, this was kind of on my radar when I was thinking about the films that I chose, and I feel like I've done a pretty good job of picking some where the drinking and the effects of the drinking feel pretty authentic, but we'll see. We'll see what you think. We'll see what our listeners think.
Yeah. I mean, some of them are more authentic than others. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the authenticity is not the important part. Right.
But of course, being drunk isn't really what we're here to talk about tonight. It's more the presence of alcohol and how that impacts a story. I think that, when I tell a good story, very often involves drinking and having had some drinks. So it's no surprise that it lends itself well to a good movie.
And some of the movies we've chosen have their own philosophies of alcohol as well, and we'll get into some of those.
Indeed they do. I have 3 movies tonight and this is purely coincidental, 3 movies that deal with different types of boozes across each picture.
That's right.
But that wasn't necessarily the criteria. Although I'm glad that we have a lot of different booze represented.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of different kinds. Yeah, I didn't necessarily look at it that way. I'd have one kind of booze that no one else has, but we'll get to that at the very end.
That's true. So I did want to make mention of the fact that we have started to, thankfully, get some questions from listeners.
Yes.
We've asked
instead of just complaints.
Right. With plenty of those.
Yeah.
But yeah, we have some questions, and I know that we have plans to do a little mini episode in the near future where we field some questions. But why not put one out there this evening since it ties into this theme?
Yeah, let's go with it.
One of our listeners asked, in a few episodes, we've heard the slightest sound of a pop, suggesting that a can is opening while you guys are talking. What is each of your podcast drink of choice? What do each of you choose as your drink of choice?
Well, I generally have, first of all, a lot of coffee.
That's true.
A lot of coffee, water. But, when you hear a pop like that, it's often an American light beer.
Yes. And I'm going to concur. I sometimes there's a glass of water, but whenever there's a sound of a can opening, it's because there is light beer just inches away from my lips. And
which, to be honest, is about all I can handle these days.
Yes.
One or two is pretty much my limit. So, like for me, that's being boozed up.
Right.
But yeah, that's generally, to answer the question, that's generally what it is.
That is what it is. Now, one last consideration before we get into our movies is, since we're talking about booze and perhaps our listeners are in a place where they can drink some, we would like to invite anyone who's along this ride with us to take a drink anytime either of us says any form of the word booze. So booze drinks.
Yes.
All of it. All of it counts.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
It does.
Don't drive into the store after you've done that.
No. Call ahead.
Yeah.
We'll put your movie
do this at home.
Behind the counter for you. All right. Well, with that, Rob, why don't you get us started with your first pick for Boozed Up?
Okay. I'm going to start in 1973, a great year for drinking. This movie is The Last Detail, directed by Hal Ashby. This is written by Robert Towne of Chinatown fame. This is in the Booze It While You Can section. Here's the back of the box. 2 Navy men are ordered to bring a young offender to prison, but decide to show him one last good time along the way. I'm going to skip the tagline on this. I know what I normally do is I get my tagline from Letterboxd, and I do realize that sometimes those taglines are not. There's a lot of times these movies have several taglines.
Right.
This one is I don't even know what they're doing here. It's like a line of dialogue that wasn't in the movie, and then there's all like the crazy symbols that symbolize swear words and stuff. It's just stupid. I'm going to skip it.
Okay. I support that.
Thank you.
Can we just decide that it gets a D
in the
tagline category?
I'm giving this a fat F.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's really bad, but anyway.
All right.
This movie is Jack Nicholson and Otis Young are 2 career sailors who are tasked to transport young Randy Quaid to military prison. Randy Quaid is a kleptomaniac, I guess. He's found guilty of stealing or trying to steal $40 out of a donation jar.
Randy.
Which sounds like something he might do in real life.
Yes.
But it happened to be the favored charity of his superior officer's wife, so he had the book thrown at him, and he's sentenced to 8 years in naval prison, which seems like a lot.
It does seem like a lot for $40.
But yeah, the Nicholson and Young have a week to get him from where they are to the prison, which is not that far away. And they get a per diem, and they decide to take their time. And they treat Quaid as less of a prisoner and more like a rookie who's learning the ropes, I guess. They spend a lot of time in Washington, D.C. and New York on the way. And they get Quaid drunk. They get him laid.
Yes, they do.
They take him out for the world's best sausage sandwiches in a great scene. But they basically have to get all of this 18-year-old kid's coming of age packed into a couple of days before he's sent to prison for 8 years. And what we get is a combination of a hangout road trip movie.
Yes. I was going to say, this feels like it fits more than one theme, but
Oh, for sure.
Boozed Up is a good one.
Yeah, there's some good boozing up here.
Yeah.
The cast is such a blast, mostly and especially Jack Nicholson. He's so good in this. In addition to his fantastic mustache.
He does have a fantastic movie. He spends a lot of time without a shirt in this movie.
He does, yeah. Yeah. And he's like, I think he was, what, like 35 or so when he shot this? But he looks every inch of 35. Like, he looks like a grizzled military veteran.
Yeah.
But he himself is such like a counterculture icon. To see him playing this part where he's like doing his best to be like the straight military guy, it's kind of hilarious in one way, but also it's kind of his character also in the same way. It's like barely pulling this off.
Yes. Barely pulling it off is a great way to put it.
But of course, this movie features a couple of great kinds of boozing up. And I don't mean different kinds of boozing. I mean like different settings and whatnot. They do some drinking at a house party, which is cool. It's like we've all ended up at those house parties that we weren't planning to be at. And, you know, it's always because you've been boozing up.
Yes.
That's always fun. And then at one point, they end up in an alley just getting hammered because it's like a really good, like, we missed our train kind of drunk.
Yes.
And they just get, like, real fucked up. And the centerpiece of the movie is them getting hammered in a motel room.
I was hoping you would mention that.
Oh, it's fantastic. That is a special kind of boozing up.
Oh, it is. And I think it's a really familiar type of boozing up for a lot of people.
I mean, I think a lot of people have been there. It's like a staying up all night thing with your boys or girls. Like nowhere to go. You're not going anywhere. You're just drinking until you can't stand up anymore.
Yeah.
Just pounding beers.
You're in your underwear.
Yeah, oftentimes in your underwear.
Yeah.
There's never enough to drink. Like you always run out.
Right. And
at some point.
The dresser in the motel room is just full of empty cans. And
Yep. But I think my favorite part of the movie is in that scene when they're trying to set the cots up to go to sleep. And they're just like fucked up. And Jack Nicholson is like setting up his cot. First of all, they're trying to decide who's going to sleep where. And like none of them can understand what the other person is saying. And this is a great example of this was a very believable drunk scene.
yes.
Like they're talking over each other, kind of hearing each other, but not really. Their vision is not clear. You can see them like looking past each other, and they're all doing really well. But Jack especially. But then when he tries to lay down on the bed when it's like crooked. And you can see him like convincing himself, like, I can make this work. Yes. I mean, I laughed my ass off. It was so funny. It is so funny. And it's such a great view of like good drunk acting, which you don't see that often.
Yes. And I don't know, there's something funny about being sober and watching other people drunk and seeing them do things that you know you've done when you've been drunk, and this movie gives you plenty of that. It's great. I mean, it captures the true boozing up spirit to me, including why and when and where we booze, and it's got great performances, including a magnetic Jack Nicholson. So I think this is a great addition to the boozed up shelf. I do too. I hadn't seen this, and I'm glad that you gave me the reason to. I wonder how you would feel being in Randy Quaid's shoes and being shown the ropes by Jack Nicholson. It's either the best experience ever or the worst. And I think it might be the best. I think especially in his situation, he needed this. He did. Including getting his ass kicked at the end. Like he needed all of it. He didn't deserve to be going to prison, but like, he wasn't ready for it in any sense. And so like, he's definitely a little bit more ready than he was at the beginning of the movie. Yeah, it's almost an interesting parallel to the idea of a last meal. When you're on death row, it's this last bit of pleasure before the end. And he'd never gotten drunk, I guess. Right. Like he basically was like, well, maybe he had, but like he basically sounded like probably not. And so that's a good thing to experience before you go away for 8 years. Absolutely. Yeah. Jack Nicholson's never not great, but He's really something special in this. The scene that stuck out to me was when they're in the bar trying to get beer for the and he pulls the gun on the bartender.
He has that line right before or after that scene where he says, Randy Quaid says, "Well, I'm not old enough to drink yet." And Jack Nicholson says, "Well, everybody's old enough for a beer." And I think he's right.
Wise words, yeah. I think we've all had somebody in our life who has shown us the ropes in some capacity.
Yeah.
And it's not often that you get to see that as the story of the movie, and here we get it. So
yeah, absolutely. And not many people are lucky enough to have that person be Jack Nicholson.
No. Yeah, maybe it had an effect. Maybe it had a long-term effect on Randy Quaid beyond just this film, because
I don't know. I don't know if I'd lay it at this movie's feet.
Well, fine pick. I'm glad it's on the shelf. I hope if our listeners haven't seen it, they give it a shot. Well, I'm going to bring as my first choice a movie from 2013. I plucked this from the Cheers to Bad Decisions section of the store. And my movie is Drinking Buddies.
Appropriate.
Yeah. Back of the box synopsis. Weekend trips, office parties, late night conversations, drinking on the job, marriage pressure, biological clocks, holding eye contact a second too long. You know what makes the line between friends and more than friends really blurry? Beer. Tagline, a comedy about knowing when to say when. I think the back of the box and the tagline here are working really hard.
I think the tagline is decent. I think the back of the box is like 12 different taglines thrown in a blender.
Yeah, but it does pique the curiosity without revealing too much about the movie.
I know we talk a lot about taglines, but let's get to the back of the box here. I want the back of the box to tell me what the movie is about. But not like a list of the things that somebody thinks it's about. Like, tell me what's happening in the movie.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Well, I will give some more context. This deals in a subject that we've talked about before, which is romance on the job. It was a topic that came up with Adventureland. It comes up again here. But what does Drinking Buddies introduce to the equation? Well, booze drinks. Now, the two main characters, played by Jake Johnson and Olivia Wilde, work at a brewery, and that matters. The movie deliberately characterizes the brewery as a fun place to work. It's like everybody kind of knows each other. There's a lot of socializing going on. And
add alcohol to that mix, and
exactly.
Socializing gets kicked up a notch.
Indeed it does. So, the two main characters both work at the brewery, Olivia Wilde and Jake Johnson, and they work in different capacities, but they are really good friends. Each of them are in a relationship with a different person. Jake Johnson is dating Anna Kendrick's character. Olivia Wilde is dating Ron Livingston's character. Mm-hmm. So the four of these friends go on an overnight trip, and that's where we see some attraction across the aisle, so to speak.
Yeah.
Jake Johnson and his coworker Olivia Wilde have some extreme chemistry and what looks like mutual attraction to one another. Meanwhile, on the overnight trip, Anna Kendrick ends up actually making out with Olivia Wilde's boyfriend.
I don't know if you're going to get into this, but like, how much did you buy that like these people should be together? Yeah. In any combination.
So that's a good question, because obviously you're fixated throughout this movie on how perfect it seems like Jake Johnson and Olivia Wilde would be together. But when I look back on past relationships, I know that I've been with people that I should not have been with. And I don't know. I think that sometimes it takes seeing another person that you're maybe more attracted to teach you that, okay, well, maybe this isn't where I need to be.
Okay.
And we get a little bit of that.
First of all, I want to point out that I forgot to cheers you at the end of my last movie.
Oh, yeah.
Or my first movie, The Last Detail.
Cheers.
So cheers to The Last Detail.
Cheers to The Last Detail.
But I wanted to completely disagree with you.
Do tell.
Because I don't think that this couple seems at all like, oh, they definitely belong together. To me, that was like, their energy was like...
Wait a minute. Are you talking about Olivia Wilde and Jake Johnson as two people who should be together?
Should not be together.
They should not be together.
Well, no, not even that. It was their energy wasn't like these people shouldn't be together. Their energy was just like, give it a fucking rest, all right? Just like they didn't have the energy of like a couple. They had the energy of teenagers.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And it wasn't like, and two teenagers isn't like, oh, these people belong together. It's like, no, they're just acting like teenagers.
So I don't disagree with you, but I think that it's real and it's believable because they are constantly throughout this movie, and I surmise throughout their friendship outside of the small window of time that we're getting in this film, I think they are constantly walking up to that line of what would it be like to be together without ever crossing it.
Yes.
And they're just constantly dancing right there.
I think yes, and I think that's what the tension in the movie is. I don't think they belong together at all, though. I think the answer to that question is no. Of course not. No, these people are like obnoxious together.
Oh, I agree, and I will get to that.
Okay.
Because I think that's an interesting part of this movie.
Maybe there's some attraction there, but it's going to end up nowhere because when they get together, they're completely obnoxious.
Right. Good. Well, we'll come back to that.
Okay.
We do have two people that engage in actual physical cheating on one another. You know,
Yes.
like Anna Kendrick and Ron Livingston kiss one another, and the other two are engaged in what could only be defined as emotional infidelity. I mean, they are like apparently in love with each other.
But it doesn't seem romantic at all.
It doesn't.
You know what I mean? That's what I'm getting at. They're like buddy, and like almost like. It's almost like there's nothing like romantic between the two. Like even when it seems like it's going to be like that, like it just completely fizzles.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, but I don't think it's not romance. For me, what it is it feels like because they're never ever getting to that point where they're engaged in a relationship with another, they're living perpetually in the honeymoon phase of a relationship, which isn't what it's really like to be with somebody.
Yeah.
And I could see how that's maybe not authentic, but to me it felt like...
I mean, honestly, Jake Johnson seems perfectly happy with his girlfriend.
He does.
And like it kind of like catches him off guard. He was like, oh, you thought that there was some... You know what I mean? To me, that's what it seemed like. He was just like, oh, I wasn't even thinking about it this way. And then he was like, okay, maybe this might work for 5 minutes. And then he was like, no.
Right.
No thanks.
Right. So yeah, it ends up we get a big old mess with one couple
all this romance
actually
talk.
cheating and the other couple not quite but seeming to have something emotional going on. Why did I choose this? Joe Swanberg, who's the director, has a friend who pitched a film theory to him, and her claim was that if you have the skill set to make a comedy, it's immoral not to. Which is a thought-provoking proposal that I don't entirely buy. But I think I get what, the way he rationalized it is that comedy is such a difficult category. And Swanberg made a name for himself in horror. Horror was his bag for the longest time. And then he decided to give this movie, this genre and this film a shot. And it's a huge departure from what he had done. But I loved what he did with this. And he's got his fellow horror director Ty West as one of the character actors in this. Yeah. I think that this is a funny movie, but not a setup and punchline kind of funny.
It's a romantic comedy without much romance.
Yeah, it's sometimes awkward humor, and
it's cute.
It's cute, yes.
It's kind of
cute. I agree.
Except I didn't dig many of the characters really. I don't know.
Well, I constantly found myself wondering, would I hang out with these people? And I could hang out with Jake Johnson.
Yeah.
Just because he's magnetic in practically everything that he's in. But
he like his character is one of those guys though that's like always like the fun guy. And he's just at a certain point you just want to say like, hey dude, like
yes.
Let's like not like we don't have to just be playing even with his girlfriend who he's about to get married to. Like, they're up all night and they're like just playing card games and stuff. Like, let's play games and games and games. It's like, okay, like, at what point do the games stop?
Right. When are we going to have a real
Yeah,
conversation?
so-
And he actively avoids the real conversations
Yeah.
with her. He doesn't want to talk about marriage. But, one thing that I was going to say that I appreciated about this was the writing. Interestingly, there is no writing. There was no script to this movie whatsoever.
Wow.
The director had a rough framework for the story he wanted to tell and what was going to happen in each of the scenes. And he told the actors, it's up to you. Make up your own dialogue. Talk to each other the way you would talk to each other.
That actually doesn't surprise me because it did seem fairly improvised.
It was entirely improvised.
But I didn't realize it was entirely improvised.
Yeah. And I think I liked it. I think that it amounted to these actors really embodying their character, and it didn't feel like one person was writing everybody. It was truly, they were all kind of in charge. I do think the acting is pretty good. These feel like real people, especially Olivia Wilde, Anna Kendrick and Jake Johnson as well. Ron Livingston is always a little bit hard for me to believe in anything that he's in.
I wouldn't call him unbelievable. I didn't like his character.
Yeah.
I'm like, why is anybody with it? Like, why is Anna Kendrick into him? Why is Olivia Wilde into him? Like,
Yeah.
What did he even do? Like, what was cool about him? I have no idea. Like,
No.
why was he hanging around these people?
Yeah, it's a good question.
One of the things this movie gets into, which is relevant to the topic, is alcohol at work.
Yes.
How it completely changes the vibe.
That was the next thing I was going to bring up, which is the workplace is already kind of an interesting setting for romance. Like you spend 8 hours a day every day with the same people. So it's not surprising that that's a place where romance can occur. But, this specific workplace dynamic and the workplace itself is a unique ecosystem for romance because there's these characters work at a brewery where connection flourishes, not just between customers and employees, but between employees and employees. And yeah, it's, I think, an artificial version of real life. You're not engaging with the world in the way that you are with people in this brewery. And, I think that's why Jake Johnson and Olivia Wilde think that they have something when they actually don't. Because as soon as they're thrust into real life and have to engage with each other outside of this space,
what is going on?
It's like, what the fuck?
I've worked in a brewery, and probably the similar size to what's supposed to be going on here. And that is the thing that happens is, especially if it's before it reaches like a level where it's more corporate, where, you can walk into work in the morning and pour yourself a beer and no one really thinks anything of it. And it's weird how that seems so normal when you're in that environment.
Yes.
You see them like, oh, let's have lunch. And then like, okay, cool. Like they get their lunch out and they pour themselves a stout or whatever. They're sitting there drinking a beer at lunch, which is like, fairly normal in that world.
Right.
And like that can obviously lead to some dissolving lines and some bad decisions. It can also lead, sometimes like if it's just a little bit, like it doesn't hurt,
Right.
Come into work. You see the scene of Olivia Wilde coming into work in the morning. She just pours herself like a little 8-ounce pour. Like I've done that.
Of course, yeah, and I believe it. I mean, I have to believe that is exactly how life exists in this space. So ultimately, this is in my opinion, grounded story about the blurry line between friends, coworkers, and romantic interests. It's an uncomfortable topic, but it's also a real topic and a familiar one for a lot of people. So this movie dives headfirst. It comes in at a 3.1 on Letterboxd, decidedly lower than the score I gave it. Sounds like it might be just spot on for you, though.
It's a 3-star movie.
Okay.
Yeah, it was fine.
I rated it higher, but I am eager to hear what others think, and I respect your opinion. You had some good points.
I didn't dislike it. It is,
I hear you. Well, cheers to drinking, buddies. It's
Cheers
going on
to
the shelf.
I'm going to take us to the year of 2003.
I remember that year.
It's a good year. The movie is Old School, directed by Todd Phillips. This is filed under Booze Olympics.
Take a drink.
Back of the box. This is short and to the point. 3 friends attempt to recapture their glory days by opening up a fraternity near their alma mater.
That's it. That's the movie.
Tagline, all the fun of college, none of the education. Good, gets the job done.
Yes.
I think Old School is one of the best comedies of its generation, maybe of all time.
This was the first time that I can remember laughing to tears in a theater. I mean,
Yeah.
this came out when I was in college, and it was the right sense of humor at the right time in my life, and I loved it.
Seeing the right comedy for the first time in a theater with a bunch of people who are also seeing it for the first time is such a great experience.
It's magical.
There's so many that I can remember. On the rewatch of this, I did think to myself, like, of all the things, like, if I could go back and experience for the first time, I wasn't even thinking necessarily this movie. I was thinking if I could go back and experience that moment when I saw the Dan Band in this movie, that reveal, because like I had never heard of them before. Right. I didn't know it was coming, and then all of a sudden when that like drops and you're not ready for it the first time, like I mean I might have come close to pissing myself. Like it's too goddamn funny.
It's so good.
We get Will Ferrell in his prime.
Oh my god!
Like has he ever been better?
I think he's only been better one other time, but
Anchorman.
Yeah.
And then like Vince Vaughn, I almost wanted to say this was his return to comedy, but this was really like the start of his comedy career.
Yeah.
Because like you think of Swingers as kind of a comedic movie.
Yeah.
But it's not really like a comedy in the pure sense. And like he didn't really do any comedies after that. He did like the Jurassic Park movie, did like the Psycho thing, a bunch of like serious roles.
Yeah.
And this is when he kind of like found that other persona of like the old fuck up who is trying to get back to the party days.
Right, because this lands him Wedding Crashers, this lands him The Breakup. I mean, he just goes on to do
Dodgeball.
Yeah, he's almost the same guy in all of these movies,
Yeah.
but it's fine because it works.
It absolutely works.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what he was meant to do.
Yes.
Even Fred Claus was, you know. We also get Craig Kilborn and Jeremy Piven as the villains, who were just like perfect guys to play total assholes.
This whole cast, top to bottom, is yeah.
Luke Wilson, I don't know. I mean, something about him is just like it seems like he's half-assing it. I understand like that's kind of his thing.
Yeah. He's the straight guy and does a fine job with it. I mean, he gives everybody else a chance to shine.
I don't mean to complain. It seems like I think the moments where there's improv going on,
yes.
I think he doesn't know what to do, and so it seems like he doesn't really. He kind of like loses a step. I've seen the unrated version. I don't know when the last time I saw the original version was. Like maybe I'm seeing some of these like cut out parts.
Some stuff
but
that was cut.
I don't think he's like much of an improv guy.
Yeah, you know, I hope you also appreciated Sean William Scott's brief turn in this movie.
Love it.
It's. I mean, there's so many good parts of this movie, but his is tremendous.
Yeah. So in addition to this great premise, we have a talented director, a good script. We've got like a ton of comedy talent that's like firing on all cylinders.
Yes.
And I really miss the days of raunchy comedies that could become like big hits.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's still R-rated comedies out there. Like it's still happening, but nothing really kind of like breaks through.
No.
You know, nothing becomes a big hit like to the point where you know it's like everybody's talking about it. I think it's just kind of like comedy's too niche these days.
Yeah.
I think everyone's got their own funny things, and like most of it's moved to TV or I guess YouTube or TikTok, something like that. But Old School, I think, accurately captures the energy of that time when it's of your life when it's like time to move on from the college years into quote real adulthood.
Yes.
Everybody's getting real jobs or getting married. Some of the more intrepid are starting to have kids at that point.
Yes.
There's always a couple people who are reluctant to move on, who like still want to keep the party days going. And that's a fun time of life, and I can see why it's hard to give up. It's also exhausting.
It is. Yeah. I mean, I can see as a man who is at the age, if not a little bit past it, of these guys in this movie, I can see why the idea of returning to that life is certainly alluring.
For like a little bit.
Yeah. But they have to commit to it, and they sure do
I
commit.
mean, how old are they supposed to be?
I would say mid to late 30s, right?
Really? No, they've got. I mean, like their characters are just like, I don't know. I'm thinking they're supposed to be like mid to late 20s. Like I think the actors are older, but I think the people who are at that part of their life are like 25 to 30.
Well, Vince
right?
Vaughn's married as a kid, and so yeah,
but he's the guy that got married at 21 or something, right?
Yeah.
But these other guys are like 25, 26, 27, right? Like they're not that much older.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I always imagined them as being older. But when you do the math against like where they're at in life versus what they look like, you're probably right. It's probably in that mid to late 20s, but they all look like they're in their 30s.
It's hard to tell. I don't know. It's hard to tell. I'd be curious what the filmmakers think their age is. But a big part of moving on in your life in those eras is letting go of the boozing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, and I think that's why it's great to start this movie with a wedding, because getting wasted at a wedding it acts as a great transition, because like the part of your life before you go to a lot of weddings, you're getting wasted every day. But then like by the time you reach the age where all your friends are getting married, you don't really do that as much. And so you use weddings as an excuse to just get shit-faced.
Yes.
And that's kind of a transition to like the later part of your life where you don't go to as many weddings and you just like rarely get shit-faced. Right. So that's a really good example of the wedding drunk, which is a great kind of drunk. We also get Frank the Tank as a character who is like such a legendary character, and he represents the tension between those two parts of your life. You know, like so many of us have the boozing up in our past, and it becomes part of our identity, and like that's what Frank the Tank is. He's the guy that like gets boozed up, you know, and it's kind of hard to let that go, but like if you don't, it's also really sad.
Yeah. But that character is so. I feel like everybody knows a version of that guy.
Yeah.
And boy, how long did his quote of, you know, it's so good once it hits your lips? How long were people saying that after this? I mean, it felt like
I still say,
at least a decade.
I was going to say that in a minute. It's part of my notes.
Yeah.
But it's like, I don't know. It's just like it's such a perfect encapsulation of like the allure of going back to the glory days. Mm-hmm. I don't see the appeal of staying in those days though. Like to me, like the next day you're like, fuck, like that was, maybe it was fun for a minute, but like I'm tired. Right. You know. Right. Maybe that's why I think these people have to be in their late 20s, because otherwise, like, they're waking up the next day going, like, I can't do this anymore.
Unsubscribe.
I'm done. So after a couple of days, it's over with.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this is just one of the greatest comedies ever, but also definitely about this time of your life, about boozing up, and it definitely deserves a place on the shelf next to all these liquor bottles. For this week's topic, boozed up.
Well, I mean, how can you not love Old School? I'm so glad you chose it. It's a phenomenal film.
It's great. Yeah, it's a 5-star classic.
You know, the comedy is one of those genres where you don't know if it's going to stand the test of time. You don't know if it's going to stay funny years later, and this does. I mean, we're 20 years removed from this, and it's as funny today as it was when it was released. Yeah. So great pick. Cheers to Old School.
To Old School.
All right, I'm skipping ahead for my second choice for our Boost Up category. We're going to 2020, and I am choosing Another Round as my second. Okay, well, perfect. All right. This comes from the ABCs of BAC section of the store. And let me give you the back of the box. 4 friends, all high school teachers, test a theory that they will improve their lives by maintaining a constant level of alcohol in their blood. There is no tagline for this. I don't know that it needs it.
Yeah. I think boozed up should be the tagline.
Boozed up should be the tagline. Well, interestingly, this is a Danish film, and the title in Danish is Druk, which translates to binge drinking.
Oh.
which I don't know is an accurate term for what's happening here.
Sounds like it means drunk.
Right.
But like maybe it means like really drunk, so maybe it translates to like
drunk in excess or something like that. Yeah. That makes sense. Well, the back of the box is literally all you need to know about this movie. It's an elevator pitch in the truest sense of the term. I'm going to give a little bit more detail, but I love how simple the premise is for this. It was when I was introduced to this movie and the idea of it, I couldn't wait to watch it. And so I was glad we had a theme that gave me a chance to check it out. So at the end of a school day, Mads Mikkelsen's character, Mads Mikkelsen is the star of this. He plays the character of Martin. He's confronted by his senior students and their parents who express that he's become a barrier to them passing their history exams.
I don't really know what their complaints were, but I also think they were right. He was a really bad teacher.
Oh, phoning it in. Yeah, he was on total cruise control. And later that same day, Mikkelsen's character and 3 of his friends are at dinner celebrating one of the friends' 40th birthday, and the group discusses the theory of psychiatrist Finn Skarderud, who believe that humans are born with a blood alcohol content deficiency of 0.05, and that being at 0.05% makes one more creative and relaxed. It's interesting that he pitches it as being born with a deficiency of 0.05%. But so the 4 of these guys decide to test the theory, and they talk themselves into it by acknowledging that Hemingway and Churchill drank their faces off, and
which also it flies in the face of the theory, right?
Yes, 100% it does.
But also, like, this guy is, like, clearly they're just, like, looking for an excuse to keep the party going.
Mm-hmm. So, they set some rules for themselves. There's no drinking on weekends, no drinking past 8 o'clock, blood alcohol content of 0.05%, until they maybe change the rules later on. But, this was directed by a guy named Thomas Vinterberg, and the film is based on a play that he had written while working in Vienna. The story was originally written to be a celebration of alcohol, and the idea was that history would have been different without alcohol. It was also going to center around the life of a character inspired by the director's daughter. She tragically died in a car accident 4 days into filming this movie. So they pumped the brakes on filming. The script was reworked to be more life-affirming, and it was shifted to become the story of 4 high school teachers who engaged in this experiment. But in its original state, this was really just about the youth culture in Denmark and how drinking was just a fundamental part of their lives. But it became a more interesting movie, I think.
I think that comes across, though, even in the few scenes that they show it. It's like
100%.
Like, these kids just graduated from high school, and like even in their high school classes, they're talking about like, okay, who got drunk this weekend?
Mm-hmm.
It's like kind of treated as like a thing you shouldn't do, but also like not a big deal.
We understand that it happens. Yeah. So why did I choose this? I think the premise is so very fascinating. It seems like it cannot be effective as an experiment or sustainable, but it does pique curiosity, and it's exactly the type of experiment I want to see unfold as long as someone else is doing it.
Well, the experiment kind of, like, the premise falls apart at a certain point, and not just because they changed the rules. They didn't commit enough to the 0.05. They immediately were like, that's not enough, which speaks to the idea of, the idea of this is like, a little bit of alcohol is helpful.
Right.
And I think that, like, there's something to be said for that. But also it's dangerous because you can't keep that balance.
Well, no, and a little bit of alcohol at this pace and frequency very quickly becomes just a normal amount of alcohol, and you need a little bit more in order to, so it doesn't surprise me that they quickly decided to step it up.
Plus, like, the people making the decision to up the amount of alcohol are the people that are drinking. Like, that's not how experiments work. Yeah, that's not science. But also, like, the premise and the experiment kind of falls apart too when they're like, when they decide, like, when we're just gonna get really fucked up. We're gonna keep drinking. Like we're gonna keep drinking like past the point, whatever. And it's like, are we supposed to believe that they didn't know what was gonna happen if they kept drinking till they blacked out?
Well, it's
like, are we supposed to believe that like this was a surprise, or like let's find out if we keep drinking what happens? It's like, yeah, we know what happens. We've all done it.
It's funny that we're talking about this right after Old School, because I feel like these guys are four very different dudes compared to the main characters in Old School who fondly remember a life of drinking and debauchery. I don't get the sense that these guys were especially crazy in their youth. However,
but they went to the culture. They went to the same high school that the high school kids went to.
Yeah, the culture suggests that it's a rite of passage.
Yeah. Let's find out what happens if you keep drinking after you're just normal drunk. It's like, yeah, you get really fucking drunk. Like, yeah, we all know this. And like, they never really showed the next morning when these guys are just like, fuck, what am I doing? Like, they never showed that at all.
Oh, I think they did.
I mean, just once. So it's like, yeah, like when it was really bad. Yeah. But like, these guys are like 40-something years old. Like,
right. And there are a lot of next mornings.
Right. Like,
when an experiment like this
like
is
if
happening.
Me and you in our 40s decide to stay at 0.05 for 16 straight hours, the next day we're going to wake up and be like, we should never do this again. We're done. Like, we're done. It's like, it's a bad idea.
I think so. I'm not going to try it to find out.
I mean, maybe after maybe 1 or 2 days, but like these guys are definitely reaching a point like pretty early on going like, I don't even like this. Or either that, or like, I guess the other thing you do is say, I need more.
Right, right.
I guess that's what they do.
And that is what they do. The fact that it's 4 high school teachers who decide to engage in this experiment ups the stakes. Obviously, these guys aren't operating heavy machinery, but they are shaping minds, and it's fascinating to see how alcohol affects them at work. It's also interesting to see how the experiment evolves, which we've already talked about. I do want to talk briefly about Mads Mikkelsen. So in domestic films, we're so used to seeing this guy play villains. I mean, he was a villain in Casino Royale. He was the villain in the first Doctor Strange movie. He took the role of Grindelwald from Johnny Depp in the Fantastic Beasts movies. And he's great when he's the bad guy. But he's also phenomenal in this part as a reserved family man going through a midlife crisis and realizing he's becoming boring and checked out on his job and his family.
He's really likable.
He is.
And great dancer.
Phenomenal dancer.
Great dancer.
Yeah. So Mikkelsen has a ton of range, and he gets to show it off here, so I love that. This movie, similar to Drinking Buddies, does flirt with the notion of alcoholism. In fact, maybe in this case, it more than flirts with it. It's an obvious threat when you're drinking all day long, just about every day of the week.
On purpose.
Yeah. But the last thing I'll say is that I also appreciated that the role of alcohol here is not to drink socially or blow off steam. It's not even being consumed for taste. It's about performance, which is not something that many stories ever flirt with or dive into. Performance is the least likely place you'd expect alcohol to play a role, but it's fascinating to see it unfold. So critics love this. It's actually getting an English language remake with Leonardo DiCaprio. I think that you should not wait for that. Start with this. Definitely. See another round in its original form. This clocks in at a 4.1 on Letterboxd, which is about right in my opinion. I enjoyed John Lewis's review of this movie where he said, this is me and the fellas when the vaccine drops.
I mean, this of all the movies we've brought to the table tonight, this one has the most to say about alcohol. It has the strongest thoughts in that regard.
Yeah.
It's a real interesting flick. Cheers to that.
Cheers to another round.
Okay, I'm going to take us back to 1994. The movie is called The Legend of Drunken Master or Drunken Master 2.
Confusing.
Maybe a little bit. Yeah, I think the American release was Legend of Drunken Master. I actually think The Legend of Drunken Master is a better title because you don't really need to know about the first movie. And the first movie was so long ago.
Was it long ago? I don't know how far apart they were.
1978.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
This is This is in the Super Booze section. Here's the back of the box. Returning home with his father after a shopping expedition,
Right.
Wang Feihong is unwittingly caught up in the battle between foreigners who wish to export ancient Chinese artifacts and loyalists who don't want the pieces to leave the country. Feihong must fight against the foreigners using his drunken boxing style and overcome his father's antagonism as well. Tagline: he's got a secret weapon with a lot of kick. I like that one.
That's not bad.
This is Jackie Chan's comedy kung fu classic that is his follow-up to 1978's Drunken Master. His character is proficient in drunken boxing, which is a style of fighting that is meant to mimic the movements of drunk people. Which is a real thing. It's a real style of fighting. I don't know how prevalent it was, but it's like a thing that existed.
Right.
And I mean, the idea is that drunk people are looser and more fluid and thus able to fight better.
An interesting follow-up to our last
Exactly.
film.
It's the same basic thesis as Another Round. A little alcohol can improve your performance. And I think that is actually probably true in a lot of settings.
Yeah.
The problem is it's impossible to maintain that equilibrium between being loose and being drunk, And I think that's like, because alcohol is so powerful, there's just no way to control it.
Would this be a better movie if it was called Drunk-ish Master?
Drunkish Master. Well, I mean, Jackie Chan is able to. He's able to fight. He's able to put himself in a state of drunkenness at times.
Yes.
At least at the beginning, that he's able to like start fighting like a drunk person, but it's not until he drinks actual alcohol that he seems to have superpowers.
Right.
He can do like the real drunken boxing, and that's when like. It's one of the reasons his dad doesn't want him doing it. It was because with great drinking comes great responsibility. I think this is. I know you're not a kung fu guy, but I think this is in conversation for Jackie Chan's best kung fu movie, which means it's in conversation for the best kung fu movie of all time.
Oh, wow. Bold claim. I am not a kung fu guy, and it's not to say I don't like martial arts movies, but yeah, this
Kung fu is a certain style of martial arts movie.
Indeed, and yeah, I don't enjoy the imports as much as I know a lot of folks do, and while I certainly recognize the talent and skill of Jackie Chan, yeah,
I love Jackie Chan.
Oh yeah.
I think he's amazing, and this is I think one of his best. All the hallmarks are here. He fights off a horde of attackers all at once.
Yes.
Using objects in the room as weapons, insane stunts done without stuntmen.
Now, that is all true, and I love all of that. I find myself in films like this just waiting for the fight scenes.
Yeah.
And just I'm looking at my watch until they show up again.
I understand. Yeah, I get that a little bit. But also, like, there's not a lot of waiting in between.
No, there's not.
I mean, I think one of the things that sets Jackie Chan's movies apart from a lot of kung fu is the comedy, and I think in this movie especially, his stepmom, who's played by Anita Mui. I think she like sets the tone here comedically. I think like because in a foreign movie, the comedy is hard to like get across.
Yes,
and I think it doesn't come across as a comedy at first. You're just kind of like, is this supposed to be funny? I don't know. There's a little bit of a disconnect there because it's like it's not American. But I think she's able to like give that vibe off real strong to the point where like you totally get the comedy for the rest of it.
Well, there's another part of this that where the comedy really works, and it's I think it's true of any Jackie Chan movie where physical comedy and the way he builds laughs into his fighting and the way he reacts to things is remarkable. And
that's
nobody
what makes
else
him the greatest.
Yeah, nobody else does it quite like him.
Yeah, it's fantastic. But going to the drinking, his character not only can fight. He can fight with like pretend to be drunk, but like when he actually drinks, he gets these superpowers. He can also drink like crazy amounts. I mean, there's a scene where like within a couple of minutes he's drinking multiple bottles. He's just like pouring it into his face, wine, liquor, beer, whatever it is. He's just chugging it down.
Yes.
It's very impressive. And then when he really drinks, he turns bright red. He's kind of like the Hulk, but red instead of green. And then in the final showdown, he drinks industrial alcohol, which I guess is a thing. I don't know.
Maybe.
I mean, alcohol, like grain alcohol is like 90-something%. Is there a thing like stronger, like 100%? Even then, like, is it really I don't know. Whatever it is, it's like it looks like gasoline. It's like it has a little bit of a red tint to it. Like it looks fucking gross. And he just like drinks a lot of it, and he can fight his ass off.
Yes, he can.
And then, but he also might have like done serious damage. At the end of the movie, he's basically just like, you know, his stepmom's like, well, like he's like, don't worry, he's just foaming at the mouth and blind, and his brain doesn't work anymore. But and like that's how the movie ends. It's like, yeah, sorry, like no sequels. But I love this movie. I think it's a kung fu classic. I think it's an obvious pick for Boozed Up.
It was a fun one. Not exactly my speed, but I recognize what there is to love about this movie.
I mean, it's an insane amount of booze.
It is. It's a perfect fit for the theme.
Cheers to that.
And cheers to that. Yes. All right, so we've arrived at my final pick, and it comes from 2004. The movie is Sideways. I plucked this from the top shelf section of the store. Back to the box synopsis. Yes, pricey. Two middle-aged men embark on a spiritual journey through Californian wine country. One is an unpublished novelist suffering from depression, and the other is only days away from walking down the aisle. Tagline, in search of wine, in search of women, in search of themselves.
Ugh.
Yeah, gross.
It's got a really bad aftertaste.
Yeah, it does. Bad tagline. So I almost chose this for my road trip theme. Instead, I went with another Alexander Payne movie, which was about Schmidt. This is better for boozing up. That was better for road trips. So I'm glad I ended up where I did. Mm-hmm. So yeah, this is directed by Payne. It stars, written and directed by Payne. It stars Paul Giamatti, Thomas Hayden Church, Virginia Madsen, and Sandra Oh. They're really the only characters in this. And the back of the box does set this up pretty well. Giamatti and Church are on a week-long trip to wine country. It's kind of like an extended two-man bachelor party for Thomas Hayden Church. He wants to use this as an opportunity to get laid during what he calls his last week of freedom. This comes as a surprise to Giamatti's character, who is an avid wine enthusiast. He's also like a selfish guy.
He's an alcoholic.
He's
a wine enthusiast.
Yeah, he's probably an alcoholic. But yeah, he's a selfish guy who seems to have designed this trip around his hobby of drinking a bunch of good wine. And
yeah, but also he was completely sideswiped by his buddy, who's just like, no, dude, like that's not what I'm doing. Like, I don't know, like, you know.
No, yeah, I mean, I think plans very quickly changed.
Yeah,
but yeah, it did seem like the itinerary for the trip was more about Giamatti's character.
Maybe he should have asked his friend what he wanted to do.
Yes.
But also his friend shouldn't have just completely fucking ruined their trip.
100%. Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, Thomas Hayden Church seems like the type of guy in this role that would have been perfectly happy spending a week in Vegas as opposed to wine country. So yeah, in spite of this, Thomas Hayden Church is happy to go along for the ride. Two characters have an entertaining friendship. In spite of his antics, I found Thomas Hayden Church's character to be really entertaining and charming. I feel like I could hang out with him. I wouldn't agree with how he wants to spend his week before getting married.
Yeah.
But I would enjoy grabbing a drink with him. And there's a lot of drinking in this movie, specifically wine drinking. In fact, the effect that this movie had on the wine industry in California after it was produced was pretty profound. After the film's release in 2004, Merlot sales across the U.S. dropped 2%. Pinot Noir sales increased 16%,
wow, which
was remarkable. And yeah, it ties into some of the plot points in this movie. But yeah, why did I choose this? There's a great monologue in the middle of the film where Virginia Madsen describes why she loves wine. and it's beautiful. I think a lot of people heard this and thought, I'm drinking wine wrong. Yeah. I'm not a wine guy. I don't drink it. I don't enjoy it. But for me, this monologue gave legitimacy to this thing that brings these characters together in the movie. It's a common language, and even though wine is a boring drink, I think for this movie's 2-hour runtime, I can appreciate why some people are so drawn to it.
It's a good monologue, and I understand the sentiment. I mean, I'm not a wine drinker myself.
Yeah.
But I understand the sentiment. I think there's something to be said for like actually figuring out why you enjoy things. I think that's kind of why we're doing this podcast. I think that's kind of why we work at the store here. But also, I think this movie shows shows that the line between enjoyment and like finding the joy in something and the craft of something and that kind of thing, and like between that and fetishizing something, especially when it comes to booze. And you see this in the craft beer industry. You see this in the wine industry. You see
the
this
whiskey industry,
the bourbon industry,
yes.
Where people like fetishize it. Like you're not enjoying it anymore. Like you're turning it into something that it's not.
Yes.
And I think this movie does a good job of showing that without actually like not really commenting on it.
No.
But I think it shows, especially like when we're talking about Giamatti's character being an alcoholic, like I think that's a good excuse. Like fetishizing wine is a good excuse to go out drinking wine every night of the week, you know? And I think that's why a lot of people do that kind of thing. Like, oh, we got to go to a beer tasting, and like they're doing a release of this IPA and whatever. It's like, how is it that much different from last week's IPA? Like, why do you got to go out every Thursday and Tuesday and Saturday? Like what are you doing? Because they want to drink every night, you know?
Yes.
And I think that's the draw of alcohol.
That commentary is definitely here in this movie, and you're absolutely right. I mean, it's interesting because I think Virginia Madsen's character has a relationship with wine that is not fetishized. I think Giamatti's character,
but it's
has taken it to 11.
He's taken it to a level where it's like this isn't healthy anymore.
Right. Now, separate from the drinking element, you know, a lot of people love this movie for the romantic component. For me, it's about friendship. I zero in on the friendship between Giamatti and Church.
It's a difficult friendship.
It's a difficult friendship.
They don't get along necessarily, you know?
They don't. And that's what's so fascinating to me. These guys became friends because they were freshman roommates in college. And, you know, their friendship feels like two people who never had much in common to begin with, and who have even less in common now. But they met each other at an important time in life when they were going through something, and that gave them some common ground. And now it's about going through something again together, and it works. I love that, you know, they return to spending time together in this fashion, and I believe it.
I mean, he's not a great person.
No, he's a terrible person.
But like he's a good balance to Paul Giamatti because I don't know. Like, they show that in like the wine tasting, especially where it's like it's a contrast to that like a fetishization where he's like, whatever, it tastes good. He's like, whatever. He's like, I kind of like it.
Yeah.
And like, what's wrong with that?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
Nothing.
you have to, and we get this in the store all the time where it's like, we could be those guys where we think there's something wrong with people because they like certain things.
Right.
But you know what? At some point, it's like, if you like what you like, and like, I mean, I hope to one day be the kind of person that can just like all kinds of, like almost everything, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be the kind of person that drinks a wine and goes like, this is trash. You know, especially in front of the people who made it, you know, like they're in the winery, and to be talking shit like that, like that's not a thing a good person does. It's not a thing like a nice person does.
No, I agree with you. And this movie kind of skewers this notion that we should idolize or look up to people who are just snobs, wholly committed and invested to this thing that they're passionate about. Like, cool. I'm glad you're into that. But
we're anti-snobbery here. Like that's the idea of the show. Like, and that's the idea of the store here. Like, I want to like embrace people's enjoyment of things, even if it's things I hate. I'm happy for you.
Yes, yeah. If you want to rent Ferris Bueller's Day Off every day of the week,
come on,
go after it. Yeah,
Come
it's
on.
here. It's here. So critics love this. Ebert gave it 4 stars. He said, "What happens during the 7 days adds up to the best human comedy of the year. Comedy because it's funny, and human because it's surprisingly moving." It's a 3.8 on Letterboxd, and tonight it's my final addition to the staff recommendation shelf for Boozed Up. So,
Wonderful. Cheers.
cheers to Sideways. Rob, look at this shelf. 6 fine films, all of them perfect for lubricating the gears with your booze of choice and plopping down on a couch for a movie night.
Lovely.
The movies we chose are The Last Detail, Drinking Buddies, Old School, Another Round, Legend of the Drunken Master, and Sideways.
Go to rewindvideopod.com to get in touch with us here at the store and to get on our mailing list. Send us your questions, comments, corrections, something we missed, or maybe even something we got right.
Oh, I like that. Well, once we sober up after tonight's picks, we're going to start thinking about
Be a while.
we're going to start thinking about our next episode, which focuses on dreams. We'll have 6 films to recommend, but of course, we're interested in what you think. So don't hesitate to hit us up on social, and in the meantime, feel free to stop by the counter for a movie to watch. We will see you next time.
Be kind. We recommend.
Here's to say.
Here's to say. Here's to say.
Here's to say.
Well said.